What's going on, guys? So we have an interesting project going on today, and someone you haven't seen in a long time and a truck you haven't seen in a long time. There's my good friend Patrick. We are working on his F-150, installing some replacement speakers because the Ford factory speakers that came in his XLT package were pretty much junk by now. He does a lot of road traveling, a lot of off-road traveling, and yeah, speakers started developing a really bad buzz. He had put some kicker speakers in, and he really didn't like how they sounded. He bought an amplifier. It was a 4-channel amplifier that probably put out, I'm guessing on all 4 channels, probably 600 watts RMS between all of them. He bought a kit based off of what he thought was going to work, and it would work if we had like an additional 3 hours or more to install it, because the situation we're running here is kind of interesting, and it's one that you probably need to be aware of if you plan on buying audio equipment to replace inside of your truck. Hang tight, I'll be right back. Okay, so we still have the passenger side door panel off to install the new speakers, the new crossover, putting new tweeters in up top, or high-range speakers. And the process of doing this became easier after we kind of decided to go a different route, mainly because we don't have the amount of time it would need, or we would need to install the amplifier. So if we were going to add an aftermarket amplifier to this system, it would first of all require an amplifier. It would require a wiring kit, or putting together a wiring kit, which is really what we did. We went and got some 2-gauge wire, got ground wire, positive wire, remote wire, RCA cables, as well as several different connectors. We brought it back, and at first what we thought we were going to do was install the amplifier to power the mid-range and high-range speakers that he got for his truck. But then when I explained to him what really needs to be done for that to happen, we kind of had this aha moment that we're not going to have enough time to do it. So what would have had to happen if we wanted to install the 4-channel amplifier that he bought, we would have to pop the head unit out. We would have to find the speaker wires, and they're considered high-level speaker wires, and we want to essentially convert that into a low-level input into the amplifier, because his amplifier does not have the converter built into it. It's RCA connections, which are low-level, very low power. It's just a signal pretty much. We needed to wire a converter to the back of his wires. We'd cut his speaker wires behind the radio, wire it into a converter, run RCA cables from here all the way to the back of his truck, under the back seat behind it where the amplifier was going to live. We'd also have to run his power wire back here from the battery. We'd have to run an inline fuse holder and then a shorter ground cable from the battery to a ground point in the back of his truck, and then a remote wire, ideally from the radio or some other remote connection that only comes on with ignition, to the amplifier, which basically tells the amplifier when to turn on and off. Otherwise, there would be no way for the amplifier to know when the vehicle is running or not running, and you don't want the amplifier on all the time, or it could kill the battery. So you don't want to run your power and remote wire to the battery, just the battery wire. Then again, your remote wire is basically to tell the amplifier, okay, turn on from a standby mode whenever the key is turned on. So we would have had to run all of that back to the amplifier. Then we would have needed to run 4 speaker wires, 2 on this side, on the driver's side, and 2 on the passenger side, through here. And the way we kind of did this, instead of trying to go through this boot, we went and routed behind the weather stripping. We notched out the plastic here and behind this piece of weather stripping, so there's no pinch points, right? Everything that's touching anything is going to have weather stripping against it, and there's no pinch point here because we routed out the plastic here. So we would have had to run the wires up here, through here, into the doors to power the crossover, which is mounted right here on the other side, which I can show you. Hey, Patrick, if you don't mind, could you back up real quick just so I can show where the crossover is? It's right there. So all the wires essentially for the speakers go to the crossover. The crossover controls high frequencies going to the tweeter and mid-range frequencies going to the subwoofer in the door, or the mid-range driver in the door. Thank you. All right, so we had to kind of do some of that, but that's what we would have had to done. So we would have had wires coming from the battery to the amplifier, the radio to the amplifier, RCA cables coming from the radio to the amplifier, 2 sets of them because it's 4 channels, for the back speakers as well. and then wires coming from the amplifier to this door, and then wires going around to the other side to that door. Again, we don't have that much time to do it. There's a lot of reasons why I can't explain why we don't have that much time. We only had about an hour and a half to finish this project, which we're probably approaching that hour and a half mark now. Instead, what we opted to do was install the speakers, which are designed to essentially fit in the OEM location. We cut the harness going to the speakers. We wired both the speaker and the tweeter to the crossover, and then we wired the factory wires that go to the factory speakers to the crossover. So we put a new high-range speaker back here behind this pillar, which is in the OEM position, and this is the wire that feeds that. And again, there's no pinch points here, thankfully. Looks really nice and clean compared to how it was, and it feeds off of the crossover, which is right here, which also provides mid-range balance to the speaker here. And then of course we have the wire that came from the vehicle to the speaker going to the crossover. So the vehicle wire goes to the crossover, then to the mid-range, and then one to the high-range speaker up here. Again, this is a much shorter way of doing it. I do understand that we're not going to get the type of power to these speakers that they need. And these are 3 ohm speakers. So that's kind of an interesting one for me. That's kind of German in my sense. I don't think I've seen too many vehicles in the US that are manufactured with 3 ohm speakers. Typically it's 4, I think sometimes it's 7 if it's an OEM application, but typically 4 and 8. And occasionally you'll see a 2 ohm speaker in some vehicles. But for the most part, it's either 4 or 8 ohm, and occasionally, again, like a 7 ohm if it's an OEM speaker. But 3 ohm is very odd to me, and I haven't seen that before. But it's a 3 ohm system wired to the factory sound system, the factory head unit. The factory amplifier built into that head unit is what's powering it. We tested the speaker already, and it sounded really good. I didn't get any clipping. Even when we turned the volume up, we didn't get any clipping coming from the speaker. Clipping's that popping sound when you believe that it's maybe too much power, when in fact it's generally too little power, but there's so much noise in the signal because you're turning it up so loud to compensate for lack of power that the speaker is starting to clip or make a popping noise or make a kind of a warbly noise because it doesn't know how to handle the frequencies you're feeding it with the power that you're feeding it. A lot of people don't realize that it's actually better to typically run more power to a speaker than less, and then adjust your gain, adjust your levels to bring it down to the point to where it's really good sound without overdriving the speaker, without clipping the speaker, or without damaging the speaker. But right now, it's going to work well for what he wants. We'll probably tackle the project of installing the amplifier when we have more time, running the power cable to the back, remote, all that stuff, pop this stuff out, and get everything ran off of the amplifier, which would definitely give him better fidelity, better sound quality overall, and it would give him higher volumes if that's what he wants as well. But at the end of the day, I think this sounds really good for what it is, and it's been working well when we did the test. So right now, the only thing I need to do is I need to remount the new tweeter in the OEM location up here. I already have the wire ran to where it's going to go. I have all the wires ran to the crossover over there, basically the OEM factory wire, then it's going to that speaker, and the next one's going to the tweeter up here. We'll get everything put back together, and we'll be able to test it and get this thing back on the road. But just wanted to give you an update. Again, it's so important to understand before you get into a project like this what it could entail. It's not as simple as plugging and playing, and I think a lot of times you see kits that are sold as plug-and-play replacement kits, and that typically means it might plug into where the speaker came out, but if you're going to add something like an aftermarket amplifier, you're going to change the entire dynamics of how the system is designed to work, and you're going to be running a lot of wire. You're going to have to put a lot of thought into where things go, what it's wired into, how you get remote or ignition power to the actual amplifier, and again, it's not as simple as you think. So if you go to a shop and they tell you that it's like a 6-hour job, they probably mean it, because when you get that intricate and you're replacing the factory power source with a new power source, it takes a long time to get all that stuff done, especially if you want it routed like through your factory boot, which in this case it didn't matter to him. We don't have any points to where the wires are going to pinch and break, thankfully. But again, when you look at how you need to run things to keep them OEM looking and for it to be safe and reliable, it takes time to do that and to do it correctly and professionally. Anyways, guys, we're going to wrap this video up. I just wanted to share that with you, because when Patrick came to me today and he's like, hey, I got all this stuff, this is what they told me I needed, we kind of had to reevaluate it, because again, it was a lot more it was a lot more involved than he originally thought it might have been. So we did it the way that I think will work well for him. Now, when we have more time, we'll probably get it all done the way that we could do it with the amplifier and getting everything wired up appropriately. Guys, if you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, leave a comment below. Tell me your stories about when you bought equipment, you went to the store, you went to Circuit City when they were around a long time ago. Gosh, I can't believe I even said that. Best Buy, some of these stores to get car stereo equipment installed. You got quoted some crazy amount of time and some crazy price. And what was your reaction to it? And then did you get it done? And if you did get it done, did it live up to the standards that you thought it would? Guys, if you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up. We'll talk to you again very soon with Patrick featuring more than just his head and back. Talk to you soon, guys.